Frank Saunders scaled from 0 to 3 million ARR in just 12 months. We'll be digging into the exact cold outbound strategy, process, and tactics he used to grow his SaaS business super quick. We'll be talking about AI agents and if they're all hype or if they're actually super useful to build out your sales process and drive meetings, demos, and much more. And we'll be sharing what the early days were like for Frank's SaaS company's growth, right from starting out posting on LinkedIn to building up the brand to all of the outbound strategies that he followed so you can do exactly the same. Plus, we'll be diving into a lot of the mistakes that folks make when it comes to their outbound strategy and some of the secret ingredients you need alongside outbound to make sure your general go-to-market is a success. Let's dive into it. Frank, welcome to the show. Give us a quick introduction to yourself and your company.
Yeah, so Frank Saunders, I'm running a company called The Forge or Sales Forge, essentially. There's many forges, many products. I've been doing this for about 3 years. We specialize in outbound, all things outbound, specifically cold email and LinkedIn, and doing that programmatically. We're typically fit for folks that have at least 3,000 accounts, so 3,000 companies that they want to target. And that's our sweet spot. That's what we would typically say we're the number one multi-channel platform for that. And yeah, I've been doing this for 3 years, building different products. It's part of a concept called the software compound model. You're ultimately building multiple pieces of software, selling out the same user and the same customer, and you're becoming a bit like Apple essentially by the end of it. So we compare ourselves to Apple a lot. Prior to working in Salesforce, I've been in sales for over a decade. In my last gig, I had a sales team of about 50. So I've done all the stuff that you want to do on the front line and managing teams, speaking to the board, optimizing the CAC, you name it, all that stuff. And then I really had enough back then, thinking that, hey, the only way to scale pipeline and actually generate more revenue was through more bodies. And I thought that was the wrong way to look at things. And then I thought to myself, what would be a different way of doing things? How could I scale pipeline, improve results by not having that many people? And today, my sales team of 5, together with me, we produce more output than my old sales team of 50 3 years ago, just to give you an idea how things have massively changed. And actually, a lot of things have, came into effect since, ChatGPT, LLMs, Geo, you name it, all that good stuff that came into play. And you can achieve more output today with significantly fewer humans. And our job is really to make, companies lean and mean. And yeah, in the first year, we scaled from 0 to 3 million bucks in ARR. So much faster than any outreach software in the planet. And yeah, doing pretty well. And we just continue to scale. We're very capital efficient, profitable as a business. We did raise $500,000, but we're looking to raise more. And yeah, off to the races.
Love it, man. Love it, man. So we're going to be digging into that. We're going to be digging into how you've grown so fast, not to 3 million ARR in just 12 months, which is solid. But we're also going to be digging into, no worries. We're also going to be digging into AI agents.
Yep.
Talking about the actual process you followed at your business. So anyone watching, listening in can replicate it for their B2B or SaaS and start getting some meaningful conversations, demos, sales calls flowing with their outbound motion. So first and foremost, Frank, AI agents, is it a load of hype or are they actually bringing in meaningful sales calls to B2B SaaS companies in 2026 and beyond?
So it's very hard to answer this one because if I'm very honest, in the last few months, at least 5 AI SDR companies have died. So on one hand, you could say, they're full of hype and they don't work. And that's because, it's very hard to orchestrate really good AI agents. First of all, it's very hard and you need a lot of capital. So it will take typically about 1 or 2 years, I would say, to build a really good AI agent that would actually work for a segment of the market. So yes, you need the capital, you need good investors, whatever, to really make it. The other problem is that the market became so crowded so fast in the last 2 years with all the other companies like 11x, Artisan, you name it, all of them, building the agents. And the thing is, it doesn't work for everybody. So for whom does it work and for whom it doesn't work? So it typically doesn't work if you're selling in an environment where 6-figure deals is very typical, 7-figure deals is very typical. Sales cycles are sort of longer than 6 months, I would say. It's not really great. If you're looking to target Fortune 500 companies, it's not great. Essentially, anything that's sort of enterprise-y, enterprise sales, you want to stay away from AI agents in full. And then everything that's more sort of, let's call it transactional or high velocity sales, then definitely that's more applicable. And then naturally AI agents are only good really for 2 things on the outbound front. One is a programmatic, essentially computational sort of approach towards emails and LinkedIn messages on outbound. So that's LinkedIn plus a cold email. So that it works there. But you can't, for example, cold call today. And some of the teams, especially in enterprise, majority of the demos that they book is through cold calling. And it's illegal to cold call in Europe and the US. So these are the main markets. So if you can't cold call there, then you need to figure out how to get an opt-in. There's a way to growth hack track it as well. We haven't done that yet, but I know some really smart people out there that drive a lot of meta ads into the funnel. They get an opt-in and then they immediately apply the agent to call the prospect because they have the consent to call. So there are ways to do that. We definitely run AI agents, for example, ourselves on the inbound front. So yeah, it doesn't work for a lot of the segments, and the only way to figure out for whom it works and for whom it doesn't, which is why a lot of AI agents have died or they've seen a ton of churn, is to onboard a lot of the customers and essentially to learn when it works, when it doesn't work. So you need to get these learnings and figure out the different sort of niches where stuff works. And so yeah, we have also churned through a ton of customers and just trying to figure out whether it works or not. And now we have a qualification criteria where we jump on the call and we really try to figure out whether you're a fit or not. And we tell the customer whether you're in the green zone, the yellow zone, or the red zone. So yes, we do turn off a lot of customers because we know they're going to churn, and we don't want the churn metrics to look horrible. We're not here to get a customer just for 3 months, which is our billing cycle. We want them to stick around for like a long period of time. So we're trying to predict, will they be actually successful with us or not? And if they're in the yellow zone, so as in there are some risks, but like we want to be transparent with the customer, and we always tell them, hey, listen, we don't believe that you have a big enough of a TAM and blah, blah, blah to actually make this work. Then as long as they're aware of the risks and they're happy to go ahead, then we'll go ahead. But yeah, we definitely are not anymore in the mindset of onboarding anybody. And so do the other AI agent companies as well. But I can tell you still, we looked at some, other softwares or other AI agents and how they work, and they're still not correctly orchestrated. Even the big boys, that generate tens and tens of millions of dollars in ARR in agentic sales, you look at those softwares and you speak to their customers, etc., and you look at the way that, the agents are, playing around and doing things, you're like, damn, this is not what you would do in sales typically. So you feel like there's, a bit of a mismatch. And it feels like the engineers are building this stuff and product people rather than sales people. See, this is where there's a disconnect there. So yeah.
That's what it feels like from me from the outside looking in. That's why I was keen to get you and have this conversation, because I have limited experience using them, certainly from an outbound perspective as well. So I was keen to kind of bring someone who's on the forefront of it. Because for me, I've, just like yourself, weirdly, whilst I am a founder and B2B marketer, I have a strong sales background. So I've always come from a sales background. And for someone with limited knowledge on how AI agents work for a go-to-market kind of outbound sales perspective, I always think that they make sense for me for like automating tedious tasks. If you can do some kind of set LinkedIn outreach, they can help with cold email, those kind of tasks, but it doesn't feel like they'd work on anything more advanced than that when a salesperson actually needs to speak to a prospect, run a great discovery call, uncovering pain, aligning their jobs to be done, finding their motivators, seeing if they're a good fit or poor fit based on if they qualify, etc. Don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, it's exactly true. You just need to know when to apply humans and AI agents. So I'm a big believer in, you have a sales funnel, whatever. There's a funnel, right? But the funnel can't be fully owned by AI agents. And it would be stupid to say it has to be kind of done fully by humans because, humans go to bed and whatever. So you need to know at which parts of the funnel you are applying agents. And I'm going to give you an example of that. So right now, if you're watching this or whatever on LinkedIn, whatever, if you go to our site, and so currently we are what's called in our sales hours because we're catering predominantly for the US, you can literally call somebody on the site. So you can literally click dial button, call, that goes into Slack, and you'll speak to a real human. And that part of the funnel makes sense because there's a lot of ambiguity at the top of the funnel and people just have a lot of questions. You're not really sure what questions they're going to come with. And there's so many different questions that people ask us on the site. And we generate over 200 calls on a monthly basis. So a lot of calls because we have a ton of traffic. But then the other parts of the funnel, so for example, if you sign up for a trial or you booked a demo and you didn't end up buying from us, so essentially there's no activity in the CRM, you didn't purchase anything, or maybe there's no activity in the app, we're going to call you using AI voice agents. So we essentially, I've flown my voice and you'll get a call saying, hey Sam, this is Frank calling from The Forge. I just saw you sign up a week ago. How was the experience like? So one thing that we're doing is we're farming insight, trying to figure out why you're not buying stuff or what's your experience like. So we have a lot of context that we can pass over to the product team. And then we're asking the person whether they want to book on an onboarding call, demo call, or explore any of the forges. That's like one very good use case. The other one is like, imagine you have churn account, right? So everybody has churn accounts. And in high velocity sales, you typically have hundreds of churn accounts per month. And instead of, running sort of email, automation, sort of, funnels, whatever, trying to bring them back, again, you can apply a voice AI agent, right? Because you have the consent to call them. And you can say, hey, I saw that, you were a customer like a year ago or 2 years ago. I was wondering, whether cold email is still relevant relevant to you, blah, blah, blah. And so that's an example where there's context. The context is there was a churn account. Back then, they subscribed to Salesforce or one of the other forges, and you're trying to bring them back, right? So because maybe now is a better time to kind of re-engage, etc. So that's another example. The other one, the cool one, is like imagine you booked a demo and the user did not attend the demo, right? So, and instead of, asking the rep and, to always chase, yes, we're going to do that. But still, if they didn't come back into a demo, again, a fantastic use case for a voice AI agent. So you just need to know when to use humans for, one part of the funnel versus the other one. And by blending in the right way, the agents and humans, you're maximizing actually truly the output and you're minimizing the cost still. So I'll give you an example how to do that in Outbound, actually, right? Where we generate currently, overall, we generate over 500 demos a month. So we would call us the top 1% for the volume of activity we generate at the mid-funnel. But 30% comes from outbound so that means, 100 plus demos comes from outbound every month. And then the rest comes from inbound, actually, right? So we have a lot of activity in inbound as well. In Salesforce, which is our software where you essentially do the execution only for 2 channels, like cold email, LinkedIn, that drives about 100 demos on a monthly basis. But apart from plowing in humans and humans setting up the campaigns, we also have the agents running for one part of the business, right? So again, that's another example of where, okay, for this segment of the market, we decide that we're going to fully own and be in control of the copy, targeting, infrastructure, blah, 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 you name it. And for the other side of the, for that part of the market where maybe I don't have a really good angle when it comes to the copy or like whatever the problems are, the agents are much better to figure that part out as well. If you're a bigger company, typically we'll say, hey, okay, all the key accounts, right? So the accounts that could pay us a ton of money. Same for you, Sam, right? So you have some particular probably types of customers that could pay you more money. And then the other guy, small fish, maybe it's not worth your time. So that's another example where you would use agents, right? So you just know also when, for which, kind of segments of the market, what to use, humans or AI agents. So yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're basically using them to kind of automate some of the follow-up, get back in touch with churned accounts, folks that no-showed demos. And is that because they've opted in previously that you're then allowed to use an AI agent to call those folks up?
Yeah, voice AI agents you're allowed to do that, on the voice front. You can only call essentially what we call inbound stuff, or essentially when you have consent, you can call them. If you don't have consent, try and figure out how to get consent. So there's ways to kind of growth hack it. So for example, I don't know, you give them like a checklist, whatever, some sort of resource, and then they tick the box that there's a consent. Then let's say you only have the email address, then you go and enrich that email address with the mobile number as an example, and then you call them still, right? So you don't ask for the number, but you figure it out. So there are ways definitely to engineer this. And today we do a lot of calling. We do about, a couple $1,000s a week using humans, naturally on the cold calling front, and then a few $1,000s on the inbound with AI voice agents as an example. So
Got it. I think that gives some nice context, and especially for folks that maybe aren't using these as actively, like myself, and I'm sure many people tuning in, I think that tees it up nicely. So I'm keen to dig into kind of your own growth at Forge and the multiple SaaS companies you're running, and almost do a timeline of those first 12 months, like the go-to-market that you ran from almost the zero to hitting that 3 mil ARR within the year. So it'd be interesting to know kind of what were the first steps, what did the early days look like of building out that motion?
Yeah, so it was all about founder-led sales, ultimately being sort of a bit everywhere, whether that's a bit on LinkedIn, a bit of YouTube, etc. And then you're warming up the audience. So you typically call this concept sort of inbound-led outbound, essentially, right? So in order to have really strong results in outbound, right, if you're reaching out to people direct and asking them for their time and getting them to demo, etc., it's much easier for you to be warming up the audience. And naturally, back in the days, I was poor, as in I could not spend money on ads and stuff like that. So what do? You just write really good posts on LinkedIn, or you even go to Reddit and you go to other places. You're warming up the audience, right? People kind of get educated. And then once you warm up the audience for a while, typically like a few months, right? So people get to know you connect to a bunch of ICPs. So even the outbound that I would do, let's say on LinkedIn in the early days. So I would just connect to a lot of ICPs, and I would not even message them, like nothing. But you connect to so many ICPs and you connect to about 100 people per week. So if you do that consistently, and not just across your one profile, but all the profiles that you own, that means, I have other 2 co-founders in the business. So I had access to 3 profiles. They have 30 LinkedIn profiles that I have access to. Is my sort of, army. But back in the business...
Is that all of your sales team?
Yeah, sales team, even support people, engineers, content,
Gotcha.
You name it. It does not matter what you do at the company. Just plug it all into Salesforce and off you go, connect to people. Whatever you want to do, whether you want to ask them to jump on a webinar, or here's a quick sheet, or right now what we're running, we have this little community called Bacon Forge. We're inviting people into community. So there's multiple of these sort of, let's call it micro conversion that you can optimize for. You don't have to always push for a demo. demo, right? So, I always say patience is virtue, but like learn how to always keep warming up the audience, both from a standpoint of I'm doing social selling, right? I'm warming up, I'm showing myself, but also reaching out to people and trying to be helpful where, again, something that is of use. So for example, we run a webinar a while back, how to write cold emails, and people just are really bad at writing cold emails, right? And then I try to aggregate as much info as I could and then show it in the webinar on how to do that, invite a lot of people, hundreds of people turn up, and our current attendance rate on average or registration we get is about 500 on a monthly basis. So, and actually we do a lot of outbound to invite people even into a webinar. So that's an example of a micro conversion. So back in the days, we were doing a lot of let's call it little automations. And back in the days, we did not have LinkedIn ourselves as an automation. So we're using competitor tools to automate even LinkedIn and do a lot of outbound, but we would drive them towards something, like a webinar, some piece of content, etc. But to do that again successfully, you also need to make sure, as I said, you need to make sure you're visible on LinkedIn. And that literally means posting every day, Monday to Friday at least, like once a day, and even weekends. Fun fact with the weekends, by the way, is the fact that because people don't post much on the weekends, you're not competing as much on the weekends, actually, because other let's call it creators or other people, because they don't post, that means you're more likely to get more reach during the weekend. So I personally recommend to post on the weekends. There's less competition.
Is that personal experience you've seen more impact from posting on LinkedIn on the weekend?
On average, you see that, imagine the post quality is, let's say, the same, right? It's just that during the weekends, you find that you're suddenly getting 10, 20, 30,000 impressions, which is very weird. But that's because there's low competition, essentially, because the other people are not posting, they're chilling, whatever they're doing. But people are still scrolling on LinkedIn during the weekends, see? So I would say don't stop during weekends. People are still scrolling LinkedIn, and so if your ICP is active, just definitely do it, right? So I used to do aggressively that. The other thing that I used to do aggressively in the first year is always trying to be, let's call it visible, also offline. So I'll go to some startup events, tech events, you name it, building up more and more of the brand so that, again, when I hit them with an email, LinkedIn message, or I would call them or whatever, or even WhatsApp them on outbound. We also do aggressive WhatsApp outbound, hundreds of messages on WhatsApp every day. Back in the days, it was maybe 10, 20, cold outbound WhatsApp messages, so that they knew who I am, right? Because Frank. Oh, I've seen Frank on LinkedIn. Oh, these funny things that he does, or funny things that he says. Oh, you have been following him. He has a cool founder journey, and that works, right? People also want to start a company one day. They're watching this guy Frank, building a company from the early days.
I can resonate a lot with this, Frank. This sounds very similar to our early days at Breaking B2B.
You just do things that don't scale in the early days.
Like you say, you don't have the cash, so you've got to get more creative, haven't you, with how you do things.
Yeah, and we scaled to the first $1 million in ARR with no employees at all. It was just two co-founders on the product engineering front, so they were building the stuff and I was selling it. Then you understand that at the $1 million in ARR, you have hundreds of customers, and they're coming on intercom, so the chat app, right? So they're just talking about asking questions, their bugs, etc. So we hired, first person on support, then engineering, so not even sales. We only added people into go-to-market at about 2 million plus in ARR only back then, and that was on content front, funny enough, not on the sales front or not on anything else. Content, head of content was the first person that we hired into the team. So the other reasoning is why we did that is because apart from being super visible on LinkedIn, that we hit people hard with cold emails and everything. These emails were not really cold, right? So because we warmed up the audience, but the other piece that you need to do is also be super visible also on the search front. And we were a nobody. So there's a lot of competitors, hundreds of competitors out there, and we're nobody. So we thought, how could we be on the radar? And we started to do actually, and we still do that today very successfully. We started to do reviews about our competitors on LinkedIn as well, on the blog and everything. And guess what? We started to index. And then our ideal customers, even ChatGPT back in then as well, you search for a review of a competitor, and then it will link to our site. So we were getting a lot of traffic, and what's this company? Salesforce. And then again, so when we hit them, I heard about Salesforce. I bumped into one of your articles. So it makes your life easier on the outbound, right? So outbound can only be super successful if you have the inbound piece sorted. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter whether you do enterprise sales or, selling to a lot of SMBs like I'm still doing today. You need to be kind of everywhere, right? You need to have these multiple, people need to be able to see you on Reddit and YouTube and in search, ChatGPT, they see you everywhere. And suddenly they have this feeling of I have not even signed up to sales. I have not even started a trial. So they want to start a trial, but then when they get an email, they'll be I heard about you, right? So it all kind of needs to, be done.
It's an ecosystem.
Yeah, it's an ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. As Frank mentioned, once you were scaling past 1 million ARR, content, SEO, and AI search was a big part of building out the inbound engine to support the outbound. And one of the tactics he talked about was showing up for dream clients when they have high sales intent for your offering, either in AI searches or on Google, when they're looking at things like competitor reviews, competitor alternatives, competitor pricing, or evaluating competitors against each other. This is a prime time to show up in Google search and AI search to attract dream clients. This is where you can dig deep into their pain points and start shining a light on where your product or solution stands out in the marketplace. And if you know dream clients often compare you to alternatives, you can scoop up a lot of those demos, sales calls, and sign-ups for folks that are frustrated with their current vendor or evaluating their options. This is just one of the many strategies we can implement for your B2B or SaaS company over at Breaking B2B. And often companies drive pipeline and revenue as quick as 90 days when working with us for SEO and AI search. So head over to breakingb2b.com or hit the link in the description below to grab a free strategy call with me. Right, back to the video. Am I hearing this correctly? You got 1 million ARR basically from just pure sweat equity, posting a ton on LinkedIn, showing up, doing some automated cold outreach, you and your founders kind of leveraging basically everything you could, in-person events, like building the brand, pumping out content, doing outreach, got to that, hired your first person at 1 million ARR, which was more support. And then was it just more of the same to 2 million, or did the strategy shift slightly from 1 mil to 2 mil?
I would say no. Like at that point, when we were like 1 million beyond, we had started to have what we call cash flow issues. Like we were making so much money, but then also we had some expenses that were going out every single month, and that forced us to raise $500,000 in VC funding. Like one of the reasons.
Okay.
So we could have been profitable and bootstrap, but it was just not really possible. There was like a few reasons why we had to kind of also raise as well. The one option was like, let's get a loan for our business, right? So we don't need VC funding. Why dilute and give up equity to etc. And we thought, well, let's get a loan. Well, guess what? If you go to any bank or any even fintech out there, they're not gonna give you any money. Like if you've been around for less than 12 months. So we've been around like for a few months and 1 million AR, and so nobody wants to give you money apart from VCs naturally. So when the VCs see that naturally you're growing crazy like this, of course they want to give you money, right? So the only dilemma is naturally back then is they said, Frank, listen, you're never going to make it. It's never going to be a big company. You have hundreds plus competitors.
The VC said this.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, because I'm a first-time founder, right? So it's like a red flag for a lot of VCs. First-time founder, red ocean market, one of the worst categories in the world. Something to do with email. Like it's really one of the worst. Like, another company building something around email. This is so boring. Never going to make it, we proved everybody wrong on at that stage, and now there's a lot of VCs, knocking the door, etc.
Did they squeeze you much in terms of percentage for the 500K?
No, they didn't. No, it's like the best way to look at it is if you're raising a round and you have giving up less than 10% of equity, you've done a good job. So we did less than 10%. So you give out less than 10% of the company at every round. When you do that, it's a good way of raising money. Typically, what folks do is they give up like 20% on average, and that's just too much dilution. You're gonna get peanuts by the end of it. But I always say, if there's a path to get to 100 million, as in, there's a humongous market, humongous problem that you're solving. Like sales is an example of that. I would say do raise money because we have a lot of competitors that raise a ton more money than we did, right? And so they were well funded. They're right now in San Francisco. They're pumping out everything. We didn't. We just raised $500,000. Fun fact: we didn't spend a single penny of it. So by the end of it, we're not spending. It just sits in the bank account, for the last 2 years, gathering dust.
But then, was there other benefits to it, like the VC introductions, like networking, that kind of stuff? Maybe they made some intros.
Yeah, investors are not just good for the money, right? So I always say get the right people aboard. Like, you want to get investors that know what they're good at. So as in, you want to get investors at a particular area that you're not good at. As in, for example, there's one investor that specializes in all things legal, for example. And another investor specializes in fundraising. And then the third one, so we have like three main parties. And then the third ones are former tech CEOs. So essentially, they have a lot of knowledge as to running companies and handling problems, etc. So like they definitely can bring something to the table. And I think as first-time founder, it's totally fine. Like I know there's a lot of people talk about, why you need to be bootstrap and stuff like that. At the end of it, your job is just to grow the company to the moon, right?
And
if the moon is 100 million, I think you need to raise personally. But if you're somebody like, I don't want to name anybody, but essentially you're happy with 10 million and 20 million AR, and you want to talk about it on LinkedIn nonstop and being bootstrapped, go for it. Happy days. I have an aspiration to get to 100 mil, so you need to raise. So is my take. And VCs bring a lot to the table that people just don't think about, and they will bring more at A round and B round and C round and so on and so forth. So, but yeah, we always got to do outbound, right, as a business. But I think in the early days, outbound 0 to 3 is paramount because, it's the cheapest way to acquire customers. Sending cold emails is very cheap. You just need to know what you're doing. You need to buy some infrastructure, blah, blah, blah.
Word of mouth's cheaper.
Word of mouth is cheaper. Yes, I mean building a good product, right? Typically, like I would say, in like a heated space like ours, the best product typically wins. So that means if you have a really solid product, yes, the word of mouth is strong here. And in other categories, and that's because in our category, I think like salespeople or founders, they do talk to each other and they do recommend the software. People talk in Slack and WhatsApp communities, whatever. So that is definitely strong. But not everybody is in communities and whatever. And unless they're gonna get an email, they're never gonna hear about us. So we also think about outbound also in a bit of a different way, and it comes from a very influential person. So he said in the space, think about outbound or like sending a cold email as a form of advertising. So if you don't think about email, as a cold email, you send it and you're asking for something or whatever. But if you look at it a bit more like advertising, trying to educate the audience, and you do that consistently meaning you're knocking on doors of every single potential customer once a quarter, that is the better way to build pipeline than asking for a demo or whatever. Try to educate customers, and then when the time is right, they know they've been receiving emails from you about, how to write cold emails or whatever, trying to educate, trying to be helpful. Try to be helpful first, but not in a way where you look at the emails like, oh, damn, these guys trying to be helpful, Try to be truly helpful, right? It's like, if you are making a session on how to write cold emails, just make it goddamn amazing session, something that you would actually pay for. Hundreds of pounds or whatever, euros, dollars, whatever. Like something you were like, damn, this is truly valuable, and you want to rewatch it, whatever. And something that people typically gatekeep, right? But you're just giving it out for free, putting it on the web. And one of the things I highly recommend that people should think about, which massively improves the results on cold email, is have a super strong way to do what's called brand recall in the very early days. So naturally spending, money or effort in marketing, but how can you, if a person has seen you on LinkedIn, etc., how can you generate brand recall? So when I think about you, for example, the word that pops to mind is breaking, I think, is the first keyword. But essentially when people think about me, the first keyword that pops to mind is bacon. So, and how do you
We need to do a duo though, breaking bacon.
Yes. So, but how do you ingrain like keywords or something visual? So there's much stronger visual recall. And then, when I would actually reach out to a person and in my signature, it says Chief Bacon Officer, there's a bit of a recall there. I've seen that guy somewhere, So that helps a lot, like personal branding and push that into a cold email. So like you have to think about these little things. So yeah.
It's interesting how I thought this conversation would be mainly about kind of cold tactics and outreach tactics and things like that, but we're actually leaning more into gaining attention from ICPs, like brand building and being remembered. And outbound is a part of that, inbound is a part of that, social is a part of that, showing up consistently as someone who basically knows their shit in the industry and positioning yourself as someone that's a problem solver, maybe a bit like us, slightly weird, slightly funny, slightly entertaining, but also knows what they're talking about in their space. And so when the time comes, like you said, you just think of that snippet of their brand, and then an outbound message might flash up, or you might see them on Google or ChatGPT or whatever form it is, and then eventually think, oh, we actually need to review that, and that's the...
But the thing is that people don't think about, when you're hitting somebody up cold, that you need to do all that work prior. People just think about, oh, let me just buy some domains, email accounts, and get some LinkedIn profiles, and off I go. Sure, you'll see some results. But how about doubling the conversion rate? How about doubling the reply rate by investing upfront and having some sort of presence? Like even like having just a normal website, because that's what a typical person does. So let's say I get a cold email. Guess what I do? First thing I would do is I'm gonna go and check you out on LinkedIn. Who is this guy? What does he do? Okay, on LinkedIn, you look like a solid bloke. Then you're going to go onto his website, you read a bit more about it, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to give him a shot, and then you respond back on email, right? So then you're saying, oh, my email has worked. But I think what a lot of people on LinkedIn, when they say, oh, cold email, great results, blah, 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 but that's because these companies probably have a proper site, proper LinkedIn presence, and like these other kind of what I call basics sorted out. And then when things don't work for a lot of companies, so, I have also customers coming to me, it's like, Frank, I want to send like 1 million emails a month, and then they have no presence on LinkedIn. Not even a LinkedIn profile, for example. You look at their website, like you would never buy from them, and you're trying to be, just very frank to the customer, saying, hey, listen, I know I could, make a lot of money from you, and you could sign up and buy a lot of domains, but just think it through. Like, what would a normal person do? They get an email from you, they will go to your site. I'm not trying to say the site sucks or whatever, but like you can see it, and then now let's open my website. That's not to say my website is the best in the world or something, but like we have a pretty good site, and then you're trying to tell the customer, do you see the difference there? That they're just going to be more likely to buy from a proper site versus your site, which looks like from 1990s or something. And there are still people like that, and they don't get it. They just think that cold email solves everything.
We get exactly the same, man. It's about getting those foundations in place, right? It's like we'll see the same thing. People come to us for SEO, but their messaging won't be dialed in. They don't know their exact ICP and who they're trying to target, and they don't know the pain points they're solving. Like you say, maybe their website is like super thin, and maybe they've only got a few bucks to make this work. And I'll just say, look, get these systems in place, get this rock solid first, because just like with cold outreach, if you haven't got that base right, it's starting on basically a building of sand that's going to collapse before it's even begun.
Yeah, so, and you had to have to start kind of slow, right? Back in the days, my brand wasn't as big, whatever, than today.
For sure.
3 years down the road. Infrastructure wasn't as big, or cold emailing wasn't as high in terms of volume. But yeah, back in the days, maybe I had like 100 mailboxes and 3 LinkedIn profiles, me and my 2 founders, when we started off, in the early days and scaling and reaching out to people. And then today is now 30 LinkedIn profiles and 500 mailboxes. And that's just one workspace of one guy named Frank in the company. There's other people that do their own activity. But it has 10x since back then. But you cannot also sort of just do cold email or just do LinkedIn or just do cold calling. You'll find that you can definitely layer in multiple layers. So like I mentioned to you today, we have like 20 plus layers. But back then, there were a few layers, but like we would always send cold emails. We would always do LinkedIn DMing. And then we added, let's say, the cold calling bits, and we use a parallel dialer right now just to dial people at scale, etc. And I think everything works if you figure out because our time is like massive, you figure out who to exactly reach out for. Cold calling specifically versus emailing versus LinkedIn. And there has to be the right copy and right targeting, etc. So today, for example, because we have, let's say, hundreds of competitors, what's our kind of, let's go, default strategy that we apply is we just extract a lot of, let's say, competitive followers of LinkedIn. And then we know exactly the angle that we should be, for example, going with. And we did exactly the same thing, like, back in the early days. Why are we different and or better, cheaper, faster than a particular competitor? So when we hit with our messaging, it just resonates. That's why, if we combine all the channels together, our response rates always were double digits. It's very rare. They're single digits if you calculate, the response rates across all the channels and hitting the same audience. We are getting a signal because we're trying to always, do a good job. Because it also doesn't look great on us if we send a shitty cold email or whatever, land in spam. Like, it doesn't look great for a company like ours, right? So we have to do a good job, and we have to be also visible everywhere. So we definitely get this sort of, messaging out there. Oh, I see Frank everywhere. But how do you orchestrate this everywhere? How many channels should that be, and what should be the frequency? And same with email. So with email, we want to be hitting everybody once a quarter. So if you have not heard from me and you're watching this, I'm a bit disappointed. If you're my ICP as well, you're my ideal customer. Do tell me if I did not reach out to you. And
do reach out to me so I can cold outreach to you.
Yes.
Said no one ever. That's funny. Okay, great. All right, this is interesting, man. And I mean, this is going on a bit of a side tangent, but you mentioned that you layered on a content person. You folks started doing SEO, AI search. It sounds like you did it in a smart way because you were doing competitor reviews, like competitor alternatives.
Correct.
I ramble on about this on solo episodes all the time, that's one of the quickest ways to drive demos, sign-ups and sales calls. Literally work out what your dream clients are evaluating. So if they're frustrated with existing customers and you know why, then build content around that. Or if they evaluate competitors, 2, 3, 4 competitors, you're in that sector, start building content around that. It's one of the quickest ways to scoop up from frustrated prospects of existing competitors and scoop up those demos. And it sounded like you kind of leveraged that when you're around 2 million or so and hired a content person to build that out.
Yes, correct. Yeah. I mean, the other things that we layer into cold emails, for example, so it's not just for SEO, etc., but like we would layer into cold emails as well, is something that's happening like right now, whether there's a problem in the industry with Microsoft 365 or there's a political event, like something will happen with Trump. You can layer in this, let's call geopolitical events into your cold email copy. Like, how can you be different in the inbox, right? So when the email lands, how can you look at it as like, this doesn't look automated, but it still is automated, right? But like, well, if you mention things like, something geopolitical events, so we run like one campaign back in January, so last month, on the subject line was "Don't get caught like Maduro," and we're talking about spam filters, and stuff like that. But see, we were picking up a geopolitical event that people either agreed or disagreed with, right? So people have some sort of feelings towards it, and we were hoping for a response, either positive or negative response towards that cold email copy that mentioned that geopolitical event. So the more you're able to do that, either geopolitical event or even weather, to be honest, like, let's say I'm reaching out to people in New York. Do you know how cold it is in New York right now? And imagine the copy would read like, I bet you're a bit, frosty there, in Manhattan, whatever, but leveraging these kind of things, people don't think about it. And same with like, what's happening in the space right now. Let's try and inject that piece of content that's happening this week into the brand new campaign and let's just launch it. So like just in time copies of orchestration for a campaign will make a huge difference. This is how I was thinking back then around what's happening. Like, okay, GPT-3, okay, GPT-4 launch. Let's put GPT-4 in the subject line and let's try and, say something, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. The more you do these things, like you adjust your copies, your messaging and how you do things based on what's happening like right now, the more it will resonate, the more people are likely to respond, the better results, the better efficiency and everything. Instead of talking about something that used to work like 2 years ago or just generically about cold email or etc. So yeah.
Sounds like you're constantly experimenting.
All the time, yes, all the time. So I mean, I try not to recycle templates. So when somebody talks to me about templates, I'm actually advising them to stay away from templates because the idea is not to recycle the same way of thought. Maybe it's just coming up with new angles every time when you launch a new campaign. So when I'm launching a new campaign, I'm not clicking, let's use this template, use dynamic variables and whatever merge tags to to send it off. No, I'm thinking of a brand new angle on this copy, right? And I'm thinking of, who am I reaching out to? Like, what do these people care about right now? What's happening in the world? What's happening in space right now? What are they thinking about 2026? Well, guess what a lot of people think about right now? Claude Code, Okay, Claude Code. Claude Code plus cold email plus LinkedIn outreach. What could I do about it? What's trending? How could I make this big, And you always think about these things, And guess what? That's what works. And you don't know what's gonna be trending next month and next month. You just don't know. But whatever's going to be coming your way, just take that trending thing and just capitalize on the trend, right? That's one of the easiest ways to grow in the early days and then later on as well. So
yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that's one thing, isn't it? Being able to, especially when you're kind of smaller, you've got massive competitors. I think I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, on YouTube, is almost your unfair advantage is that you can move super fast. So folks like us, well, we're still building. You're over 3 million, we're around 2 million plus ARR. We don't have tons of red tape. We've got a lot of flexibility with things that we can build programs, we can build campaigns, we can come up with ideas, we can execute pretty fast. We run the business, right? We don't have layers of approval that we need to go through, so we can start executing on these weird ideas, whilst you might have giant competitors that kind of maybe roll out 1 or 2 new campaigns a year. You can come up with a concept, pull it out, see what the market thinks. If it works well, gets positive responses, great, ramp it up. If not, at least lesson learned. Let's move on to the next idea. And I'm very much the same with our marketing.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is people have a fatigue these days. So the only way to tackle fatigue is just try to think of, let's call it micro campaigns, essentially. Just in time, copy, execution, and just move on to the next one. Like, it has to be relatively fast because it's just like TikTok, sort of, you're consuming next TikTok, right? So people just have short attention spans and you want to be serving the content that's the most sort of relevant, contextually relevant like right now, that you could serve to the user in the form of an email copy or LinkedIn, etc. So
Yeah. And as we wrap up, if you could give one final tip to a SaaS marketer, founder, or similar for their cold outreach this year and beyond, what would it be?
Typically, if you ask any smart founder when it comes to acquisition, any form of acquisition, if something works, just try and figure out how to do the 10x of that. So you want to send 100 emails, send 1,000 emails a day. You want to write 10 blogs a month, write 100. We do 200 plus articles a month. Like, don't do what I call rookie numbers. Sure, there's a thing called conversion and things have to convert. But if you just think 10x, can you scale it? Like, just try and figure out how to do 10x. And you'll be very thankful to me year down the road that you did 10x input that resulted maybe in 5x output. An example, But conversion rates will be low when you start scaling, but you'll be super, super thankful. So double down on channels of things you want to do that actually have the ability to scale rather than working in these tiny experiments, tiny things, Work on big stuff that can either scale or just something that could be really big and needle moving for your business.
Got it. You heard it here first, folks. So copy what Frank says, then reach out to Frank and say, Frank, you need to outreach me. You haven't outreached me yet. Nice one, sir. Appreciate the conversation. Thanks for joining in, and do share how anyone tuning in can learn more about Forge and connect with yourself.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you just search for bacon, the guy with the bacon emoji, you can find me very easily. Frank Saunders from Salesforge. Yeah, if you got any questions on anything I shared, let me know.
Cheers, man. Good to chat.
Cheers.
And there you have it. I hope you found that masterclass with Frank super useful. I know I really enjoyed that conversation. And if you want to join thousands of legends enjoying the Breaking B2B newsletter, where you also instantly unlock my 90 days to revenue SEO and AI search playbook and video, head over to breakingb2b.com and hit that newsletter tab. And with that, I shall catch you on the next one. Cheers.